It's no secret Australia's relationship with China is as complicated as it is fragile. On the one hand, they're the key to our economic prosperity. So, if we want to be rich, 我们必须爱中国人. On the other hand, we fear China's expanding tentacles of influence. We don't want them getting too close. Which brings us to the South Pacific. Somewhat arrogantly, Australia has always considered it our patch of paradise to protect and nurture. But now, the Chinese are moving in, splashing their cash in places like Fiji and Vanuatu. So, what's next? A Chinese military base right on our doorstep? The tropical playground of Fiji. It'd be hard to think of a more idyllic location for two nations to, discreetly at least, butt heads. But that's exactly what was happening in Suva Harbour last week. Flying the flag for Australia were the warships Melbourne and Adelaide, and quietly stalking them, a Chinese spy ship, pretending, not very well, to be a fishing vessel.
That's a space surveillance ship. It's a scientific ship.
The seriousness of this highly planned, coincidental meeting was not lost on anyone. Is China's aim to be the most powerful nation in the world?
I think in the very long term, yes. It's got global ambitions and it's challenging the rules-based international order.
Should we be worried about China setting itself up in the South Pacific?
Absolutely.
These days, around the South Pacific, the Chinese seem to be everywhere. And they're hard to miss. You've only got to look at the money they're throwing around on new buildings. But security analyst Dr. Malcolm Davis says what seems like much-needed economic assistance for these penniless countries comes at a high price.
Well, what the Chinese tend to do is that they put heavy investment into countries that simply don't have the means to pay back the debt. So they're getting countries addicted to debt, and then when they call in the debt and the countries can't pay, the Chinese will take a port or a territory or take an island.
You basically make them sound like political loan sharks.
In effect, yes. If China can get a country so deep in debt that it can't pay back that debt, then China will take something else in return.
Which brings us to neighbouring Vanuatu, and more specifically, the key strategic outpost of Luganville. During World War II, this was America's second largest base in the Pacific. Now China has built an immense wharf it claims is to help the Vanuatu government attract cruise ships to the region. But the wharf's builders did such an impressive job, many are questioning their motives. Does the strategic part of you say there's got to be more to it?
There's got to be more to it, yeah, absolutely. The Chinese wouldn't be building all this just to cash in on a very limited tourist market here.
So what do you think, in their heart of hearts, they're after?
They're thinking commercial influence, political influence, and ultimately a military presence.
At half a kilometre long, Dr. Davis reckons this wharf is complete overkill for the local cruise industry. It is, however, the perfect size for a visiting foreign navy.
And that means it's large enough to accommodate large Chinese naval service combatants, guided missile destroyers, cruisers.
What do we do, even aircraft carriers?
We could talk an aircraft carrier in there as well.
When you look at this, do alarm bells go off?
In my mind, absolutely, because if the Chinese were to bring naval forces into this region, it fundamentally changes our strategic outlook in a way not seen since the 1940s.
Of course, wharves this solid don't come cheap. But China has let Vanuatu put the $114 million it cost on their tab, which currently stands at $220 million. Is this a debt trap?
Yes.
So the Chinese would be hoping Vanuatu couldn't keep up with the debt repayments?
Look, I don't think the Chinese are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're not investing in Vanuatu to help the Vanuatu people. They're investing in Vanuatu to help themselves.
This doesn't only happen in the South Pacific. China has form when it comes to debt trap diplomacy. The impoverished African nation of Djibouti owes them a staggering $1.2 billion.
And China has used part of that debt to create a fully fledged naval base there. And last year, Sri Lanka defaulted on a massive Chinese loan for a port that many believe it didn't need in the first place. China now owns the port on a 99-year lease.
What do you think of the type of businesses that the Chinese government is investing in here, or the projects?
All the projects, they are too big for our country.
Back in Vanuatu's capital, Port Vila, taxi driver William Tabak says he, and everyone he knows, is worried about China's growing dominance.
Already, we know that we borrow a lot of money from China. And
You think too much?
it's too much. It's too much. Everyone, if you ask anyone on the street, they say we are frightened of China funding too much projects.
Port Vila is littered with Chinese-built landmarks that have locals scratching their heads. This huge stadium was built for a regional games in 2017, and by the look of the hoarding, it hasn't been used for much since then. And even more controversially, this gigantic convention centre that the government can't even afford to pay the power and cleaning bills for, let alone stage events at.
We went for a drive the other day and we had a taxi driver and we drove past the convention centre and he pointed at that and said, "What a waste of money. That is not what our country needs." What do you say to that criticism?
Yes, I would agree with that.
You can't even pay the electricity bills there.
Yes, that's true. We're trying to find a solution to make it work for us.
Vanuatu's remarkably frank foreign minister is Ralph Renjanvanu. He concedes his country has made errors in its dealings with China, but denies any suggestions that the massive wharf at Luganville is more for China than it is for Vanuatu.
What if Vanuatu gets into financial strife and China comes to you and says, "All right, look, we'll bail you out. We'll get rid of the debts. Just give us the wharf at Luganville and we'll call it even." What do you say to them?
I can't imagine that offer, but we have built that wharf for our economic development. We want Luganville to become a major commercial hub, not only for Vanuatu but for the region.
So can you give us a 100% guarantee right now that China will not have a military base ever in Vanuatu?
Yes, I can give you that guarantee. We are a non-aligned country. We're a member of the non-aligned movement. So this big power play that's happening, in which China is involved, in which Australia is involved, Vanuatu wants to be no part of it.
But Malcolm Davis is wary of the Vanuatu government's assurances about Chinese intentions and says everyone in Australia should be as well.
Vanuatu is only about 1,500 nautical miles from Sydney. And if the Chinese get or establish a military base, say at Vanuatu or indeed any other South Pacific state, then suddenly we have the prospect of Chinese military forces very close to the Australian eastern seaboard.
So you're saying this is a military threat?
It's not a military threat now, but it could be a military threat into the future.
Coming up,
What do you think China's master plan is in this region?
Domination.
China setting its sights on the entire South Pacific.
Is that China's goal, to be the top dog?
Absolutely.
We reveal their sneaky race for power.
What, so you think if they can pump money in here, they'll get support at the UN?
Yes, because you have to remember...
I'm sorry, but that's bribery.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.